time to get a haircut. But when that will happen is an excellent question. But we're not going to talk about my hair today. Today, we are going to be talking about Sarah Pinbrough's 13 Minutes. Hold on, I don't like this. Up close and personal! And that's a little bit better. So yes, I'm not sure if I have posted my review of Don't Look Back yet, but I really hated Don't Look Back. And then I started 13 Minutes, and I was like, in some ways it felt very similar. And I gotta say that even though I'm pretty lukewarm about 13 Minutes, I liked it so much more than Don't Look Back. 13 Minutes is about a teenage girl named Natasha who has fallen into a river in winter, and she dies for 13 minutes. Why she ended up in the river, she doesn't know. But when she comes to, her best friends are acting funny. She's just like, I want to know what happened to me. And so she decides to turn to her ex-best friend, Becca. So before the incident where she dies for 13 minutes, she was pretty much a mean girl, and a couple years earlier had dumped Becca. Now she's like, I need the one person that I can rely on. And so then they go through this process of figuring out the truth behind why she ended up in the river. That is the premise that you get from the book. However, after much thought, I disagree with the premise. I think it is extremely misleading, and in some ways, I'm okay with it being misleading because this book is a psychological thriller. What you think is true is not true. But it bothers me that even without that aspect, my initial assumption was that Natasha and Becca, their new relationship was going to be something entirely different than what it turned out to be. Because here's this big spoiler. Natasha orchestrated the entire event. She hadn't meant to actually die, but she miscalculated when the guy who she expected to discover her was going to discover her. And so yes, she accidentally died for 13 minutes. So the whole thing is, she's a mean girl. And she essentially decided that her minions needed to be put in their place because they were keeping secrets from her. And so she was going to throw herself into the river and then eventually blame it all on them. Not necessarily so they'd get in trouble, but just so that they would learn their places. And then she was going to use Becca to get there. This book really is well written. There's two perspectives. Well, actually, no, there's three. There's Becca, there's Natasha, and then there's the guy, Jamie, who discovers Natasha. And so, before I even get into anything else, I was not a fan of his perspective. We start with this really weird Ophelia comparison, and then we jump into him finding her and trying to resuscitate her, and I was like, who in the world is narrating? I have no idea who's talking to me. And then I think we jump into Becca, and then eventually we get Natasha. In this book is divided up into parts, and so sometimes you'll get more Jamie Becca, and then sometimes you'll get more Becca Natasha, but then we get Jamie again at the very end, and it did not make sense to me why he necessarily needed to have a perspective, because I felt like he was an underdeveloped character, because the deal with Jamie is that Becca's boyfriend works for Jamie with Jamie's music business, but I think Jamie is also a lawyer of sorts. It's really convoluted, it's really confusing, and he just was not an important enough character in the end to deserve his own perspective. But whatever, what's done is done. Anyways, aside from that, I thought that the construction was really well done, because when it is a Becca Jamie narration, it's in the past. And then when it is Natasha, it's in the present. And so what you don't realize is essentially everything she says is a lie. Have you ever seen Psych? And he's taking a lie detector test in a certain episode. And so in the beginning of the episode, we see him trying to steal something. And in the midst of that, he does all these other little things. So then when he has to take this lie detector test, he's like, oh, well, I played video games and I did this and I did that. And so you flash back onto all the little inconsequential moments. So he's not actually lying, but he is lying. He's not telling the truth. And so that's what you get in 13 minutes from Natasha. Because after she wakes up from her coma, she has to see a psychologist. And the psychologist is like, hey, you know what? It might be helpful for you to keep a journal because she has lost her memory. And so in this journal, and of course, we're getting this whole, oh, I don't think I need to do that. That won't be helpful. Like, there's no point in it. But okay, I'll do it anyways. And so we get these little entries, these admissions that aren't wrong, but they're not the entire truth. And so we eventually get that in the end where she was like, I set that whole thing up. I put things in this journal that I knew they would want to see, that would cast me in a certain light, that would cast Becca in a certain light, that would cast my best friends in a certain light. And so I thought that was really clever because you don't see it coming. She really does seem like this repentant person who is sorry for how she had treated Becca and she wants to be better. But what I think is the best part of this book is you are actually told that she is lying, that she is manipulating everything around her throughout the entire book because she and Becca play chess. There's this running theme of chess. So if you're thinking about it, if you're picking up on it, if you're paying attention to it, you realize that Natasha's orchestrating everything. Everybody's a pawn. Like, it's all about capturing the queen. It's all about her winning, about other people seeing things the way she wants it to be seen. In so many ways, this book was exceptionally executed, but then there did come a point where I stopped caring. As far as the plot goes, Natasha wants to teach her friends a lesson. Because her two best friends, like they're called the Barbies. Her two best friends are Jenny and Haley. And Jenny has been sleeping around with having an affair with one of their teachers. Haley knows about it. Eventually, Natasha finds out, and she cannot believe that they've been keeping this from her. This is something I'm not quite sure about. I don't know if this whole text conversation bit of them venting their feelings about Natasha is actually true, or if it's something that Natasha had planted, because she planted a lot of evidence against them so that the police would think that they are responsible for her going into the river. But in any case, they may or may not actually like her. They may or may not actually want to get rid of her as their leader. And she's like, they need to learn a lesson, and so I'm going to do something that teaches them where their place is. But speaking of Jenny's affair, one, I don't understand why Haley was involved with it in the first place. Did Jenny need an escort to her rendezvous with this teacher? I don't know. I don't know. And so I thought that was kind of stupid that every time Jenny was going to meet the teacher, Haley had to be there with her. It's not like Haley was driving her somewhere. It's not like Jenny couldn't get there on her own. But then the other thing about this affair was that it was essentially the catalyst for Natasha's actions, yet it got very little airtime. What happens is there's another character named Hannah, and Hannah is Becca's new best friend, but Hannah is like super far down on the social ladder. And so then when Natasha starts talking to Becca again, Becca kind of shunts Hannah to the side, and so they're having issues. But all of these girls are in a theater class together, and so they're preparing for the Scarlet Letter, and Hannah dies because a light falls on her. So the light falls on Hannah, and then at that moment, because Natasha was supposed to be standing where Hannah was standing, but Natasha says, I don't feel well. And then Hannah's like, okay, I will stand in her place for right now. The light falls, and then everybody thinks it was Haley because Haley had adjusted the light. And then, of course, Becca is feeling guilty because Becca was the one who should have been handling the light, but she's afraid of heights. And so Haley offered to do it for her, and now, anyways, that's all extraneous. The point is, at this moment, when Hannah gets hit, Natasha stands up from her seat and is like, I remember everything. And she goes on to tell the police how this started, the stuff between her and her friends started because she found out about Jenny's affair, and so then essentially they wanted to shut her up about it. The catalyst, whether it's the truth or the lie, is the affair. Yet, we get very little of it. There is not a whole lot of foreshadowing about this affair. What we get from the beginning are these little text messages, cryptic text messages between Jenny and Haley. So we know something's going on, but we don't really know what is going on. There's no allusion to an affair, except we do get told that Jenny is pretty promiscuous. And then we learn about the affair. The teacher is suspended, and we get like news articles kind of talking about this, but no names are disclosed. And then he kills himself, and then those news articles are like, oh, well, we can't really prove it, but we think this might have been the teacher. And that's kind of it. Like, that is it for the affair. And I was just like, for something that was so important, so integral to the plot, we should have had something else. It should have been played up. It should have been made as important as it ended up being. But more about the plot. Natasha is in the river, and can I just say, she is sometimes referred to as Tosh or Tasha, and I do not know why this bothers me so much, but it does. So I'm going to refer to her as Natasha. So Natasha, in the river, accidentally dies for 13 minutes. When she wakes up, she is an amnesiac, and she sets the ball rolling. She sets the ball rolling. She puts her plan into motion by asking for Becca. I guess we're supposed to assume that she has regressed to back when they were friends, or maybe the fact that her subconscious values the friendship she used to have with Becca, so that's why she asks for her. In any case, she's now trying to make amends with Becca, and this is where I have an issue with the book summary, with the book jacket, because we're led to believe that they really reform their friendship, and there's not actually very much of that. I thought it was going to be more of, because her friends were acting funny, Natasha was going to turn to the only friend that maybe she had left, or maybe the one friend she used to value and she could possibly get back. And it's not like that, because Haley and Jenny are trying to get in her good graces because they're afraid of what she might say. And so now she has Haley and Jenny as her little acolytes, and then she has Becca kind of hanging around. And I was like, that was not at all the impression I was given. For a very short time, Natasha uses Becca for her purposes. Becca is somebody who can provide credibility. When Becca has kind of served her purpose, Natasha tosses her aside and then replaces Haley and Jenny with new Barbies. She also sort of steals Becca's boyfriend, which is something else I have got to talk about because it really bothered me. So Becca, I guess, after she was spurned by Natasha as children, she just had a lot of self-esteem issues. And one of her issues is being good enough, being chosen. And so she begins dating this pothead loser. I mean, I call him a loser because honestly, I really didn't see where he was going in life. But this pothead named Aiden, who she she sleeps with, though she doesn't really know what the big deal about sex is. And then she's at a party with Natasha, Haley, and Jenny, and she takes Molly, and she then goes and has sex with Aiden, and let's go, and she's like, oh, this is the big deal about sex. But she's constantly worried that he wants somebody else, because years past, he had asked Natasha out on a date, and so Becca's like, oh, well, he wants me now, but does he still want her? And then Natasha weaves her web, she reels Aiden in, and it's really just like a coffee date, but not a date, but you know how you meet a friend for coffee, ergo it is a date. And Natasha's new minions drop some words around Becca, and Becca rushes over and loses it. And so now this is supposed to make her lose her credibility. It's really great in that psychological thrillerness, but when it comes to Becca's insecurities, I never quite got it. And I felt like I never quite got her relationship with Aiden either, because it felt so forced. The writing wasn't as natural as I would like it to be. It was like Pinbrough wanted Becca to be insecure, so she forced insecurities on her, and by way of that, forced all these insecurities on us instead of letting us see the insecurities. Couldn't have they have crept in here and there instead of like bam, 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 like every time? I was just like, holy cow, slow your roll, you know? And so I had a really big issue with that, and it also made Becca irritating. This is around the point where I started to lose interest in the book because I didn't understand the point of Becca. And then we had all these extraneous Jamie chapters, and I just wasn't seeing where things were going or why we had those moments. Then Natasha steals Aiden away, and then this is actually really great. Although I felt like it was a bit sudden. Becca kind of becomes an amateur detective, and she's like, what if? So I know what it was. At Hannah's funeral, Becca encounters Haley's mother, and at this point, Haley and Jenny are in jail. I think actually Haley is in a mental institution, and so she's not extremely lucid all the time. But she says something to the mother about Becca being used, about her not knowing the truth, and then the mother relays this to Becca. And so Becca is like, I don't understand what that means. And so the cogs start turning, and she sees some other little things that she's like, I don't really know if that adds up. And so then she starts to wonder, what if Haley and Jenny are the ones telling the truth, and Natasha is the one who is lying? So she finds all this information, and she goes to the girls' homes, and she asks their parents if Natasha had ever been there by herself so that she could have planted evidence. And then she goes to the detective in charge of the case, and she's like, look, I think you're looking in the wrong place. Eventually she realizes that there had been mention of a video, which again, it goes in line with the whole affair with the teacher storyline or subplot, where this movie, this tape, was made into such a big deal, and I guess it's a sex tape or something. It's never really clarified what this tape is, but it is blackmail against Haley and Jenny. And so Becca is like, where in the world could this blackmail be? Because if Natasha is as nefarious, if she is as meticulous as I know her to be, then she has it somewhere nobody can find it. She eventually locates it. And this is something I actually really, really liked. Early in the book and kind of sprinkled throughout, we get mentions of her mother's computer. This computer that, because they're really wealthy. And so her mother just has this brand new computer that she never uses because her dad thinks that buying her things is what's gonna make her happy. And so it just kind of sits on the kitchen island underneath a stack of newspapers. And you don't really give it a second thought except to think, like, why is that important? And so eventually we learn it's important because the mother is never going to use this computer. So Natasha knew that was the best, safest place to store it. Becca steals the computer and then does a little switcheroo because now she starts toying with Natasha. And she's like, I know exactly what's going on. And Natasha's like, I really don't think she has the proof, but I probably should make sure. And so they rendezvous. And of course, Becca's stipulations are, you need to dump Aiden and we need to be besties again. And Natasha's stipulation is, bring the computer. Becca does a switcheroo. She replaces the real computer with her dad's computer, and then of course when she gives it to Natasha, Natasha tosses it in the river. Here's the spoiler of the end. Natasha and Becca start fighting. They fall into the river, and then so this is something I did not care for because it went from a psychological thriller to supernatural thriller where there had been no supernatural elements before. The girls are fighting and Natasha is pulled under by some force in the river because apparently the river was not happy that she had survived in the beginning. Part of this, I guess there could have been some foreshadowing, although it's unclear to me because of how manipulative Natasha was. But she keeps thinking she sees 13s everywhere. 13 is supposed to be a bad omen. I guess we're foreshadowing that death is imminent or there was more to her death in the river than we think. Natasha dies in the end because the river wants to claim her. I don't buy that. You could have had me until then. Maybe she got caught in a branch or something, like a fallen tree, and she got stuck and she drowns. I would have preferred something like that than something so out of left field. In essence, this book was not bad, but I'm lukewarm about it because I felt like there were a lot of unnecessary elements that dragged it down. To impress upon you, this is something that you should try just to see how you feel about it. And there were a number of pros. The pros mostly pertained to Pinbrough's ability to write. Yeah, I did get bored eventually, but I love an unreliable narrator. That is something that I have recently discovered. I love when I think I know the truth and then I find out I don't. And so Natasha, she was just so successful because you believe her the entire time. You really believe that she's a changed person, that she has no idea what's going on, and it's all because of that journal. Well, like, we get journal entries, we get entries from the police case, or the police file, there we go. We get recordings from the psychologist, we get newspaper clippings, we get all of these elements that come together to form a picture. And then we learn that it's really not that way at all. But as I said, I really enjoyed how it was close enough to the truth. And that is why it was successful, because that's why it was so believable. We see Natasha go to Haley and Jenny's houses to drop off their gifts. And so it's right in front of our faces that she is planting evidence, or even when it comes to the chess set. So this was something I sort of picked up on in the beginning, but I just thought it was poor writing. After Natasha gets out of the hospital, she decides to buy her friends gifts. Her friends as in Haley, Jenny, and Becca. And so when she and her mother are at the mall, her mother is like, well, what should we get them? And Natasha is like, I don't really know, whatever. And so then the mother suggests, or maybe it was Natasha, someone suggests basically friendship bracelets. And then Natasha says, okay, but I know exactly what I want to get Becca, and it's a chess set. And so here, later on in the novel, when Becca learns what the other girls got, her insecurities come into play, and she's like, oh, Natasha must value them more because she picked out something more special for them. And then when she confronts Natasha about it, Natasha's like, oh, my mom picked those out. So that was something that I had picked up on, where I was like, that's not actually true. And then later, and this is kind of when Becca starts putting pieces together, when the mother is like, oh, I can't believe those girls kept the bracelets that Natasha picked out. So I was like, oh, I get it. But the chess set is an even bigger deal, because it is supposed to harken back to the girls' childhood friendship, because it started out with Becca, Haley, and Natasha as friends. So Natasha and Becca used to play chess all the time. So we're just thinking that, oh, well, because Natasha is back to being a good person and trying to repair her friendship, this is just a nice sentimental gift. And then as the girls begin hanging out again, they start playing chess against each other. So we're just like, oh, it goes back to that. When in actuality is just foreshadowing. It's an underpinning that is telling us that Natasha is a chess master. We've already been told how good she is, but she stopped because it wasn't cool. So we understand before we understand. And then Natasha is devious. But let's talk a little bit about Haley, Natasha, and Becca's childhood friendship. And this goes back to the chess, which, as someone who, I like chess, but I don't play it and not going to go to a chess tournament, I thought this was so intelligent. It was just a really great ruse, a really great inclusion in this novel. The girls had been friends, and then at a certain point, Becca started to gain some weight. And Natasha, looking into her future, was like, I don't think that this is part of the image that I want to cultivate, which is why she kicks Becca out of the group and replaces her with Jenny. Of course, Haley is like, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? That's pointless. And in the end, Natasha blackmails her into basically shutting up. One thing that I liked, although I was wondering if we would ever get an answer, is when they were kids, Becca was having a birthday party and had this really pretty dress. We keep getting references to the dress being ruined, and it was actually Natasha who had tried to blame it on Haley, but then Natasha's mother was like, I think not, because it had to do with a bottle of nail polish. The mother knew that Natasha had this nail polish. But anyway, so I was like, are we ever gonna get to the green dress? Like, is the explanation ever gonna happen? Because it's sort of like what I wanted with The Affair, where we get this huge buildup, and it's supposed to mean so much. And in a way, they're almost flip-flopped, where I was coming to the conclusion that the green dress was going nowhere. So it was big, but then it wasn't going to go anywhere. Whereas The Affair was small, and then it became something big. Natasha is essentially a sociopath. And so we find out that Natasha was jealous of this dress, and she couldn't have that, so she ruined it for Becca. But Becca, every time she thinks about this dress, she thinks about the friend that she used to have, the friendship that they used to have. And I was like, are we ever gonna learn what kind of friend Natasha was? I understand when you're kids, friendship kind of means something different. And then as we grow up and we grow into ourselves, we sort of grow out of certain friendships. But I never got why they were such good friends. What was it about Natasha? Because we learned from this dress incident that she was a sociopath from a very early age. So what was it about her that ever made her a good friend? So like that was something that I thought the Pinbrough dropped the ball on, but whatever. I thought that the dialogue was fantastic. It was incredibly natural. You know, a lot of times adults, we forget what teenagers sound like. And even though some of the text messages got a little annoying because they were true to form, using text lingo, I'm too old for that, guys. All the conversations were on point, and that everything was as I would expect it to be between teenage girls. Manipulation was fantastic. The ending, I loved the symbolism of Jenny and Haley being Natasha's Barbies, because at first they're all Barbies. I mean, we get the idea that Natasha is the head Barbie, but then she starts referring to Natasha and Haley as her Barbies, and I loved that because it goes back to the chess thing. It goes back to she's in charge. She's playing with everyone. Everyone does things because that's how she wants it to be done. I liked how Pinbrough would sneak those little things in there on me where I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not see that coming? 2 thumbs up. Oh my gosh, I am so tired and I'm so itchy. I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe it's something in the air that's irritating my skin. The final point I need to discuss in this book is a red herring, or just another misdirection. And that is a character named Nicola Munro. Nicola Munro, similar age, disappeared in a similar fashion as Natasha. Her body has yet to be found, but there's this assumption that she died. Then when her body is found in this river, Aiden has an extremely loose connection to her. And so he becomes a suspect, and then he also, because of that, becomes a suspect in the events of Natasha's being in the river. We get newspaper clippings, we get a lot of gossip, we just get things sprinkled throughout, or not even sprinkled, but we get things placed throughout the novel that make you think that Nicola Munro's disappearance is related to it, when really it's not. Honestly, I can't remember how she died. I think it was an accident. I think she ran away and somehow fell into the river. You guys don't know how long it's been since I've read this book, but it's been long enough. Thank goodness for notes, but it's been long enough that I don't remember, and obviously it didn't make that much of an impact on me. But what did make an impact was it had nothing to do with anything except to initially throw suspicion elsewhere, which I would have been fine with if we had tied it in and made it relevant by the end. Instead, it was just like, oh, that Nicola Munro thing. I should probably conclude that little subplot. And so, yeah, we're just gonna have her, show up. Her corpse is just gonna, come out of the river. Actually, what even happened? I think, yeah, maybe her body got caught on a log or something and it was found and nobody killed her. She just died. Maybe she killed herself? I don't know. I don't care. Because this little bit is on my con side, where it was helping move the plot along and then it got dropped. And then Pinbrough was like, what are all of the resolutions that I need? Oh, Nicola Munro. So I'm just going to write her off. I recommend trying this book. I will tell you it's confusing in the beginning, which I've already mentioned. Sorry, I'm so itchy. Really confusing at first, kind of hard to get into, but it does pick up speed. And obviously, if you watch this review, you know all the plot twists that are going to happen. But I recommend experiencing them for yourself anyways, because that's the beauty of a book. At least for me, the beauty of a book is sometimes knowing the end so I can connect the dots on my way there. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you for hopefully another good book review. Actually, yes, I have a fantastic book that I am so ready to review. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you there. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, to comment, to share, to be sweet, and yep, catch you on the flip side. Bye.